All right, parents. Hey, what's up? We are back with Bill Stixrud and Ned Johnson, and we are talking about the 7 principles of raising a self-driven child, their new book, book 3. Congratulations, guys. This is
Thanks.
incredible.
Thank you.
And we are talking, there you go. Let's take a look at the book over there. So,
City
and
colors.
thanks for coming back. And parents, we're at part 2. You can check out part 1 if you haven't seen it already. You can go in any order. In this one, we're going to be talking a little bit about an accurate model of reality. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I want to start off by, first of all, in the last one, you used the word energy, changing the energy a lot. So for parents watching, we're talking about um, how to they kept repeating this term, changing the energy, shifting the energy, this relationship, the in a lot of conversation between your child and you, and how you can shift the energy. So I really wanted to emphasize that as we start here. I didn't tell you this in the last video, guys, but that really stood out to me in terms of shifting the energy. One thing that I hear from parents a lot is, first of all, they'll say, I didn't realize how much work I'd be doing on myself. And then they talk about, yeah, that the conversations are different, but it feels different. It's palpably different. The energy has changed. And here we're moving into this principle about about an accurate model of reality. And what I use the term oftentimes unrealistic. We meaning us with executive function challenges. We have an unrealistic perception of X, Y, and Z. But of reality, I'm assuming is pretty darn similar in concepts. Could you tell me why you chose the term accurate model of reality, what you mean by that, and how parents can use that?
Yeah. I think that at least where we live, and I think that we deal with people all over the country and in all over the United States and in multiple countries. And it's so similar all over the world, is kids grow up thinking that the most important outcome of their whole childhood and adolescence is where they go to college. And this huge emphasis on academic achievement and building a college resume and being practical. And so it's injurious to these really high achieving kids who they'll sacrifice their health, their well-being, their friends to get in the most elite college. And it's really terrible for kids who also for kids who are not top students, so executive ADHD, executive function problems, who are not yet nailing it in school. It's really injurious to them because they grow up and thinking, well, I'll never, I won't be able to have a life. I'm not a
Mm-hmm.
top student. I would say that's the main thing. We think it's a delusional idea because there's so many ways for kids to grow up into successful, fulfilled adults that don't involve always being a top student and always doing the right thing and never making mistakes. And so that's why we see kids, these high school kids that we work with, they say, I am my grades. Ned talked with high school kids not recently who said, everything we do is filtered through the lens of how will this be read by a college admissions counselor? It's so delusional. We want kids to
And
really understand what contributes to a fulfilling life, how to get there, and what actually makes people happy and fulfilled. And it's not just achievement, achievement, achievement.
and if I can jump in and add to that, it's harmful to both the kind of highly overachievers and the underachievers. For the underachievers, they kind of give up and think, well, and really don't engage in so much of their time. And if they think, well, why if I can't be top 10%, why even bother? They stop bothering, as opposed to thinking about, I'm working hard at this to develop myself, and I may not care that much about social studies or my math class, but I'm working hard in something in my life to develop myself, and I'll figure out what really matters to me as I go along. For the overachievers who are jumping through every hoop and dotting I's and crossing T's and woohoo, like they're super heroes, again, they're spending their time trying to meet other people's expectations of themselves, and rather than thinking about developing themselves, paying attention to what actually matters to them, rather than just racking up A's and building a resume. And we're not opposed to academic achievement. It's just that we really want use your emphasis again, Seth. We want the energy to be on developing mastery of things that matter, paying attention to what matters to themselves, and then developing skills and interests of how they're going to spend their time in college if they go to college, what they're going to do with themselves in their lives as they move forward for the next 60 years of their life.
Yeah. And I work with a lot of underachieving adolescents. And the first thing I tell them is that I don't want you to think you screwed up your whole life. I said, you could flunk every single one of your high school classes. And if eventually you decided that was a bad idea, I want to get an education, you can go to community college for 2 semesters and get 30 credits. And then you can apply to almost all the colleges in this country. And they don't want to see your high school transcript. And when I tell them that, Seth, it motivates them. Parents sometimes don't tell them that he won't do anything. Well, it's not true, because what you say is it's worth it for you to work hard because you haven't screwed up your whole life. And that's where this delusional model of reality, just as Ned said, it affects the ultra the high achievers and the underachievers in a negative way. If we understand that it's not a race, kids think it's a race to age 18, but it's not. And if you're 18 and you still got a 15-year-old prefrontal cortex, which a lot of kids with executive functionings have, my message to underachievers is with ADHD or executive functioning problems. My message is I want you to work hard and I want you to be patient with yourself, because it's going to be some time until everything comes together. So that's I think my angle on what the most important parts of this accurate model of reality. And also the second component is understanding what do we know. People have studied happy, fulfilled adults now for over 2 decades. What do we know about that? Did you want to talk about what we know about
Yeah,
happiness?
I mean, you probably know, a lot of your listeners probably know the work of Martin Seligman, what's called positive psychology, where the first 100 years of psychology were basically studying misery in all of its shapes and forms, and maybe how do we reduce that misery a little bit. And he turned around and said, let's look at people who are like legitimately thriving, who are really happy, and kind of what are they doing? What are the balances of things in their lives? And so he came up with this model of PERMA. So P is positive emotion, E is engagement, the flow experience, deeply engaged in kind of anything that really holds your attention, where you're working hard to get better and better at something that matters to you. R is relationships, and starting 100 years of research shows that nothing is more conducive to happy and fulfilled lives than the number and the depth and the quality of relationships that people have. So starting with, like, let's not drive our kid crazy or have our kid drive us crazy. M is meaning. So whether it's commitment to social justice or to the environmental religiosity, military service, something where you're working hard at something that's beyond you. And then A is achievement. And achievement's not trivial, but it's 20% of the equation. And at least in some of the spaces where we operate, we see people where it's an achievement culture. And they think more achievement, this be the thing that makes me happy. But in the same way that material things are fine, but material things don't meet non-material needs. Seth, you're feeling lonely. Well, what you need to do, man, is buy a truck and then everyone will love you. Well, no, you're just gonna be a lonely guy with a bigger truck, right? And it's not a problem to want those things. It's just that kids so often feel that if I achieve, that this will be the thing that brings me happiness. 2 quick points on that. We do this deep dive on the endocrinology, the neuroscience of happiness versus pleasure. And a lot of people mistake what feelings of pleasure for feelings of happiness. Pleasure is rooted in dopamine, right? So we all know about ADHD kids, we all know about dopamine, the deficit of dopamine, where happiness is rooted in serotonin. And so one of the really nasty things is that when we pursue pleasure, a bigger dopamine hit, a bigger dopamine hit, a bigger dopamine hit, too much dopamine actually erodes the amount of serotonin in our brains. So when kids who like to party go off thinking about going to, hanging out with their friends and drinking, the pleasure comes from the drinking. The happiness comes from being with their peers. But they often mix them up and think, to be really happy, I need to go to party and get bombed. Well, no, you don't. To be happy, you want to spend time with your friends in ways that are fun. And so really trying to disentangle those does a real service for kids. And the origin story, going back to the point that Bill made about kids think, well, if I get into good enough, that the most important outcome of life is where you go to college. He was lecturing in Texas and talking with a bunch of student government leaders, so all these really high achieving kids. And he sort of casually asked them, how many of you would like to be happy as an adult? And they all raised their hand like, is this a trick question? They said, well, great. What do you understand is necessary to be happy as a grown up? And this kid says, well, I think I speak for all of us when we understand that if you get into a good enough college, everything else will just kind of fall into place. And Bill's thinking, holy smokes, it's so sad because it's so wrong. And they will sacrifice everything, positive feelings, sleep, things that really matter to them, the relationships. I mean, Bill was asking a kid, how are testing a kid, how are friend and enemy alike? She said they're both competition. And then sacrifice things that are meaningful because, well, does it matter to me? No, does it matter to a college admissions person? And we sweep away P, E, R, and M in the pursuit of achievement. And then kids get all the achievement in the world and they're still not happy. And now they wonder, what am I going to do? If achievement alone would do it, then people at Ivy League colleges would be the happiest, most thriving people on the planet, as opposed to 60% of them are clinically anxious and depressed. And so we're not opposed to anyone who's super academic and really needs to be on that high challenge, MIT or Stanford or Princeton, whatever. There's not a problem with that. It's just that when people think I have to in order to be happy, oh. And most mental health is shifting thinking from I have to I want to. So you want to rock orange for 4 years at Princeton? Do you, man? It's simply just, it's not the case that you have to. And this is part of our issue, part of our message of what an accurate model of reality looks like. Differentiating between I have to and I want to.
And I don't know if you guys know about my story, but my model of reality was I'm going to college because I just always thought I was supposed to. I almost fell out of high school. I get into college on probation. I go through the probationary summer program, so I didn't have a summer break after my senior year. I did fine because I always pulled it together when I was in trouble. So I did well on the probationary summer school thing. And then I proceeded to fail the fall semester, fail the spring semester, failing out of the university. So now I've failed out. I go back to a community college in the spring because I think I'm supposed to. I fail the first quarter, the second quarter, and I dropped out before I failed out of that one. And then eventually I fell in love with education, went back to school and really knew that I wanted to be there for me. But that took 4 or 5 years. I think I was 25 when I went back to college with all the 18-year-olds as freshmen, and I'm basically a freshman again. And then the kids that I work with nowadays that are in college, they're either sophomores because they barely became a sophomore and they're practically failing their freshman year, or second year freshmen. I don't get freshman college students at beginning hardly ever. It's just a pattern that I've noticed. And I think that, there is that what you alluded to, that they think they're supposed to be at this place at this age. And I hear just these inaccurate models of reality where they're like, they want to be at the same place that their friends are. They want to take 5 courses in the first semester because their friends are, and they have to stay on track or something like that, but they don't have the capacity to manage 5 courses. Like I see over and over, it's like when I can coach them and they're hearing me and we can start with 2 or 3, and I could go on and on with this, but oftentimes even having a part-time job with 2 or 3 classes gives better structure than having 5 classes. And it might sound counterintuitive, but the reality is how do we be successful with 2 or 3 classes, get that dialed, and then blah, blah. But we are, those of us with executive function challenges, we don't have an accurate view of reality. We are, we are impatient. We want things when we want them. We think it should be a certain way, and we don't want to take our time. But that is what works.
True. I'm just struck by some of these studies 15 years ago about people with executive function problems. They hear a tone for 12 seconds, and then they press a button that makes the same tone. The idea is, I want you to listen to this tone, then I want you to make the same tone for the same amount of time that I did. And people with executive function problems are way off. And you make it 24 seconds, and it's even farther off. And so just that ability to estimate time, just how long is something going to take? That makes kind of getting your grasp on reality challenging. But the cognitive functions of the prefrontal cortex, all the executive functions that it does, they aren't mature until 25 plus minus 3. And if you're male and you're ADHD, we're talking about 28 probably plus minus 3. And the emotional regulation functions not mature till 32 plus minus 3. So that's why my message to so many young people is to take a gap year. Give yourself buy
I'm a
yourself
big
another
fan
year
of gap years.
of prefrontal cortex maturation, and be patient with yourself. And don't think that somehow if everybody else can do 5 classes and you can do 4, that you're inferior to other people. You may end up being much more successful than these kids are taking 5 classes. It's just a matter of your development. And
One of my favorite lines picked from Bill's lecture some years ago, where you said, knowing that you'd said that the most useful thing I've ever learned about brains as a neuropsychologist is how slow to develop is the prefrontal cortex. And that's why we never, 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 never give up on a kid or let him give up on himself.
And the crazy thing, I saw a dramatic change in my own son with ADHD between 23 and 26. I just, and because as the prefrontal cortex matures, not only does it work more faster and efficiently, it also gets connected with the rest of the brain. So it starts to be involved in processing things it didn't used to do. What I noticed in my son, who's like me, speaks very fast and sometimes too fast, and I couldn't understand him, and I have to slow him down. And as his prefrontal cortex matured, he was able to slow himself down. It became so more, because the prefrontal cortex became aware, become more and more self-aware, could inhibit a little bit more. You don't need to talk so fast. And when he was 26, this pediatrician, who's a friend of ours, had him over for dinner and called and said, "He's such a handsome and eloquent man." And at 23, you said he was nice looking, but nobody would have called him eloquent at 23. So that's why there's this never give up hope. It's just such an important message if you got a kid with executive functioning problems or ADHD, because it's working with a mature brain that's just physically, the front part, physically immature.
An accurate model of brain spell. I like that.
Yeah.
Let's wrap this one up. We're going to talk about motivation in a minute, and we'll see you in just a second.